And on today's show, how QLACs fit in existing and new retirement plans. Part 2 of this week's series on advanced retirement strategies with nationally recognized retirement expert, author, platform speaker, and adjunct professor at the American College, Curtis Cloak. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributing author to InsMark, LifeSpecs, and Backroom Technician. Let's get down to business. Well, welcome to the show again, Curtis.
Thank you, Steve.
Day 2. I'm with the professor, and of course, again, why are we listening to Curtis? Because not only does he have a huge retail practice, but he's a huge software developer with the Annuity Bulldozer and Thrive University, where he teaches some of the creme de la creme, top advanced strategies in retirement. I don't know of anybody in your league, to really be honest with you, Curtis. But today, I want you to listen to Curtis because we're talking about QLAC. This is a huge introduction. It could change the map on retirement. People say, well, I've already have all these retirement plans already online. They're in force. You may have to go back and look at this. The impact on RMDs could be huge. The benefit of holding and delaying a DIA, that income could be a monster in the later years in 80, 85. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the concepts. And the first one I want to say is, we talk about existing plans versus retro plans, right? Or I'm sorry, existing and new plans. What about the argument between institutional versus personal individual IRA? Now, everybody tells me you get a better deal with the institution. Are you going to get a better deal with QLACs, keeping it in your 401k?
It's an interesting question because we're talking about deferred income annuities here. And we've been doing, focusing on deferred income annuities as part of the product allocation for retirement for 15 years. I mean, we started this back in January of 1999, long before anybody in the industry was even thinking about these products. We were focused on these products. And about 5 years ago, we successfully put institutional DIAs inside defined benefit plans and defined contribution plans. Now, not obviously the QLAC version of these things, but and it's a fairly complicated method that we can do that, and there's going to be some limitations to manufacturers and limitations to plan sponsors and the administrators and the custodians that administer these things. But here's what I can tell you. The institutional versions of these have been extremely limited. Now, I would expect that with the QLAC coming out, that there'll probably be a lot more manufacturers get serious about doing this. But if I were to base my opinion and my response based upon what I already know, here's what I can tell you. That almost always I'll find a more competitive option for a DIA contract in the retail marketplace as compared to when I go shopping in the institutional marketplace.
And you're talking about the actual income.
Even if because you know, in the institutional marketplace, you can dial in what the revenue is to the advisor or to the agent in that case. Even if I put zero comp in the institutional product, today, virtually every time I can beat it with a retail product.
Well, then I guess the advisor needs to think about the encouragement of maybe, hey, I may want to do a rollover institutional to individual IRA.
Here's my point. Here's what I think that I'm saying to you is I don't just assume, which is generally what people do, that just because it's institutional, that suddenly those are better deals. Because I'm telling you, they're not always. Sometimes they could be. I'm not saying they won't be. And we don't know where this market goes from here. So I'd love to see surprise. I always love it when clients get a better deal. But what I am going to tell you is don't just assume because they're in plan. Don't just assume that you're getting a better deal. You need to shop outside the plan in the retail market and decide whether or not purchasing that QLAC inside the plan as opposed to having complete control and purchasing it outside the plan in an IRA is better for the client, even in a fiduciary point of view.
Now, when we're talking about existing contracts, is there any qualified ERISA products that we cannot use this in?
Well, you know, again, there's a lot to be written with regard to the QLAC and the DOL. And I mean, obviously, they've approved these things. We know it's coming. I don't know that I can, this premature to products being out there, I don't know what I can tell you about it. I can tell you that the products that we've utilized within defined benefit and defined contribution plans so far have basically met the conditions and the rules.
Now, a Roth doesn't make this. I don't think it's qualified for this, is it?
No, this is not about Roth. You can buy a Roth DIA now.
Straight up.
You can buy a Roth, a traditional individual Roth DIA. I've been doing those for years. You cannot take your Roth 401k and buy a QLAC because a QLAC is about delaying the RMD. There's no point or any value to doing that. A QLAC is about just the pre-tax dollars.
Now, I want to talk to you about this one point here that I think is huge. What do you mean when you use this phrase in your Thrive University? You use this, provide early retirement tax control. Now, I always think post-control after 70 and a half. You're talking about, oh no, I want to talk about pre-retirement control, especially with new contracts.
Well, there's a number of things that you can do prior to 70 and a half where you can create, and I know we'll do another segment here where we'll talk about what you can do pre-retirement, but understand that clients that have two classes of money, if they have a non-qualified class of assets and they have a pre-tax qualified class of assets, we have strategies oftentimes where we'll use the non-qualified and we'll concentrate a sum of money to finance, let's say 65 to 70, because a lot of people retire 5 years before they're 70 years of age. And so let's say it was 65 to 70. We'll actually use the non-qualified to cover the cash flow needs to meet the income gap. Now that income gap will be minus Social Security and pensions. And we're going to use DIA and SPIA contracts to fund those. Obviously, we'd like to pre-fund them 5 to 10 years before we get there because we're going to get a much better rate of return, a much better discount for the income value. But we're going to get extremely high cash flows, and because we're concentrating that over a 5-year payout, and we're going to get extremely low tax control, because we're going to get an exclusion ratio we like to call first in blend out tax treatment. And when you can do that with some first in first out income stream, you can control the cash flows and you can keep that bracket very low. And what we're trying to do is create an artificial period for 5 years before we're 70 and a half where we can delay Social Security and optimize it. And at the same time, we're converting by using the bracket we would have normally been in, but we're using that bracket to convert traditional IRA to Roth, all while we're also doing the QLAC purchases. So not only do we shrink the RMDs legally by using this bridging strategy that I'm describing, but we further enhance that not just pre-70 and a half, but post-70 and a half now with the QLAC. And if we get a fourth or half of the pre-tax, in addition to the QLAC, over to Roth between 65 and 70, we've substantially impacted the forced RMDs, and any backfill of income prior to 85 is going to come from what? Tax-free distribution of Roth, which also can be in the income annuity marketplace.
We come back from the break. We're going to talk a little bit about bracket bumping and how this works. We'll be right after the commercial. It's not how much money you make for your clients, it's how much money they get to keep, especially in retirement. But retirement income could cause Social Security benefits to be taxed. One tax advantage alternative is life insurance designed as a non-modified endowment contract that can generate tax-free income without taxing Social Security benefits. These contracts offer differing funding options depending upon your client's risk tolerance. For more information on how life insurance can be part of your retirement planning, just email me at steve@downtobusiness.tv. Brought to you by Ash Brokerage, the practice enhancement company. Well, welcome back to the second segment. Of course, I'm with the doctor of DIA, Mr. Curtis Cloak himself. Curtis, I want to make sure that people understand the theory before we walk into the example. What is bracket bumping and why is it so important in retirement planning?
Well, I'm going to use an example of a 65-year-old couple. So both are 65 years of age. And so today, this is how it works. You have a standard deduction as a couple, filing jointly of $12,400. Personal exemptions of $7,900, and then you have the $2,400 age 65 deduction. When you total that all up, you can have taxable W-2 and taxable 1099 income up to $22,700, 65 and beyond, and no tax.
No tax.
No tax. And understand that if we're talking about Social Security, depending on what your total tax is, if you're under $33,000, that's not taxed at all. So you could have all your Social Security and whatever's left over, as long as it's not above $22,700, still no taxes. Yeah. So you could have a lot of income. If you're over 33 total, then it's 50% of the Social Security is taxable, and then if you're over 44, it's 85% is taxable. So Social Security is going to skew this a little bit, but let's assume no conversation about Social Security. The first $22,700 is free. This is the way it works, and that's assuming that I don't have individual itemized deductions that would exceed that number. This is what I get. Then understand the next 10%, the next $18,500 is 10%. So that's 18.5. And then I've got 55.3 in the 15% bracket before I tip over into the 25% bracket. So one of the things that we focus on when a client retires before age 70 is we ask ourselves, are there opportunities to create all the cash flow they need to maintain their standard of living and their lifestyle? And there's a way to do that depending on whether they've got at least two classes of money. They have non-qualified dollars, and do they have pre-tax dollars? And we're going to focus on the potential use of those non-qualified dollars, and we're going to be able to use a couple of tax practices here. One, the one that represents what we know in the industry is tax exclusion tax treatment. But for the moment, I'm going to use my term that we trademark called FIBO. We know what last in, first out is, and we know what first in, first out is. So I'm going to introduce first in, blend out. And that represents this blending of a withdrawal of basis and gains, which represents an income annuity's tax exclusion on non-qualified. So we a lot of times will purchase, if we can buy it 5 or 10 years before an IDEA, that would be great. Or even if we're buying it 6 months before they retire in an immediate income annuity, that's fine too. And understand, if you buy an immediate income annuity that you don't delay very long and then you're getting 5 years of payout, you're not going to get any return right now. I mean, it's not about the return, but you're going to get extremely high cash flows and virtually no tax. Now, you can do the same thing if you get a decent rate, I suppose, in a money market or a cash account. But what we're looking for is to not get above the 22.7. So I'll use the FIBO to eat up some of the standard deduction exemptions. And then I have other products that actually give me FIFO treatment. Now, I won't get into those in this segment, but we're trying to create as much cash flow as the client needs while trying to control the income that's taxable low, because we want to take care of the 10% bracket, which is 18.5 if I haven't drilled through my 22.7, and then I got another 55.3. Well, between those two amounts, heck, I've got $70,000+ a year that I can bracket bump from 65 to 70. The average U.S. American, you know, $300,000 to $500,000 of 401k pre-tax qualified dollars, and you can eradicate significantly a lot of pre-tax dollars prior to 70.5. That you can convert to Roth just by focusing on what we call this bracket bumping strategy.
So if I hear you correctly, if I have space in my next marginal bracket or the next level up, I should use it.
Absolutely.
So instead of saying, well, see, Curtis, you're making me pay taxes, but you're actually already in that bracket.
Because there's three things I accomplished doing this. By the way, this is a Social Security bridging strategy, first of all, because I want to create enough cash flow. Now, this is going to be subject to a client having the right class of assets. There'll be some clients that all I got is qualified dollars, probably won't be able to do this. So maybe it'll do a QLAC strategy, but they're not going to be able to use this strategy if they haven't, you know, got some non-qualified portion of their dollars. But those that have the appropriate mix that works in this strategy, you know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to delay Social Security if there's an opportunity to optimize that over turning it on at 65 or 66. And of course, there's a number of strategies we won't get into. That's not what this session's about. But we're going to delay Social Security. But the second thing we're going to do is we're going to bracket bump these tipping points of maximizing and not wasting these little brackets by getting pre-tax dollars to Roth. The second benefit is we substantially lower our required minimum distributions, and we go to backfill income post age 70.5. We may have some pre-tax dollars left over, but remember, I still got 22.7 of free money. So even if my RMDs are eating through my standard deduction, my exemption, and some of my 10% bracket for the average client, no big deal. I want some RMDs. I don't want zero RMDs. I still need some taxable income, or I'm wasting you know, my exemption, my standard exemptions. But now, rather than being told I have to take all this taxable income because I've eliminated so much of my pre-tax dollars that forced distributions at 70.5, I now backfill my income gap because of the lower RMDs with those dollars that I flipped over using this bracket bumping strategy.
Wow. Well, that's all this time we have for today's show. Remember, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always consult your tax advisor, legal counsel, or your broker-dealer compliance department. Missed an episode? Just hop out to our video archives. And remember, you could be wiser as an educated advisor. I'm Steve Savant. We'll see you tomorrow.